Hi guys, my name is Borrodante. 3 years ago I made a video on how to paint like a god, and it's time to make an update on that. Let's talk about how to massively improve our painting skills in one video and get closer to painting like a god. Disclaimer, I don't think I paint like a god. I suck. As an example, I'm gonna be working on this page for the book written by Kevin Folk, Outlandish Curiosity, that I'm working on right now, and this is the next page I need to work on. But I'm not going to use this particular sketch or these particular colors. I'm gonna pretty much restart it, because I don't really like the way things turn out in here. Step number 1, idea. What is it? Do you really know what you're about to paint? No, you don't. Search references to improve your idea. Not just the object, but style, mood, action, beauty. Define why people are supposed to care about what you're about to paint. Don't rush. You're not gonna start painting very soon. This is important. You have to first really understand what you're gonna paint. In my case, this step is somewhat done because I know exactly the idea. This is the page that Kevin described. We need to show the red frogs migrating from this jungle forest to the distant other kind of forest. I know this should be a beautiful sunrise with good, interesting contrast of light, and the frogs really should look much more interesting than this. They're spread too evenly and boring. We need to have text over here, so not a lot of details should happen in there. And also there's a middle crease between the pages where we shouldn't put anything important. I'm gonna be using these ideas as my reference, as well as the style and different elements from other pages that I already finished, and the concept art of the frog that I did earlier. But I still will need to search the reference of a real frogs from different angles. Step number 2, storyboarding. Where is it? Locate things in space and on the canvas. In my case, I have the sketch that generally defines the idea correctly. I will have the road in the middle and the forest on the sides and another forest in the distance closer to the middle. I need to make sure that on the first page I have enough details of the frogs and the forest, and on the right page I have the beautiful sunset, distant forest, and also the road with the frogs. So pretty much my old sketch is still working out pretty well as a storyboard kind of picture. This is not a thumbnail, just an idea on where things are. Frogs in the bottom, new forest out there in the distance. We know where things will be. You may draw this and have like a sketch, something like this, but it's mostly gonna be like a doodle. Don't do a detailed sketch. We don't need that. Slow down. Step number 3, thumbnailing. We're defining the abstract level of the composition. We only think on colors and contrast, keeping in mind what we want to paint and what we defined in the storyboard, like where things will be on the canvas, but we only need to think about the abstraction of color spots. Not what the actual lighting or geometry would look like, but just what would look cool as a combination of color spots that would kind of not go against what we defined in the doodle. Whatever it is you're gonna paint, it should look amazing. So for that, I'll define the basic color. This is just the sky color. And now I'll just search what I want to see in these spots of my forest. Keep your brush big and slow down. You don't have time to rush. Alright, this is what I got. I think it looks pretty interesting. I applied everything I defined in the doodle stage, in the storyboard stage. So I made sure that there's a road, there's a whole bunch of orange frogs, and there's jungle on the sides, and in the distance there's another forest and the sky. Now I'm not sure exactly what kind of cloud shape or what kind of trees, what kind of bushes, what kind of these plants will be, but I know that this makes a good color abstraction when things are this crazy like this. I wouldn't think of any of this awesome stuff if I would skip the abstraction level. And yeah, I also looked up some of the references of the frogs to generally support my idea. They're migrating frogs, how exactly they migrate. They jump around in the jungles, what exactly the road and jungles would look like. Overall, at least, I need to know how it would be positioned. Step number 4, 3D composition. This is just a smaller continuation of the previous step where we did the abstraction level of the composition. Now we kind of need to think through a little bit where these spots are, like we need to land them. So I pretty much kind of did that already. It sort of blends together into one step, but I really wanted to emphasize the abstraction level of the composition. So yeah, we need to make sure that these color spots like are creating some kind of areas where I know that there's a surface and there are certain things on it. So yeah, I just need to make sure that all these frogs, they're not just flying in space, they're actually sitting on something. In some cases, on this early stage of the composition, you also need to mark in some 3D guides. Really think on the distances. 3D guides are obvious for, say, like cityscape, where things need to be parallel and following the vanishing point. But you also need some of the 3D guidance even for a forest, because without the guidance, without thinking through the distances, I would make frogs really big over there, and that would result in a very flat composition without three-dimensional, like real depth. So you need to think through, this is like a really huge distance, so all these frogs over there, they will just blend into common spots, like many frogs in one brushstroke pretty much. It's like a mass now. And even over here, these frogs should become smaller and also kind of combining into some kind of clusters of frogs. So my 3D guide right now will be just the size of the frogs. I see that over there, frogs are super tiny. That means everything else, the trees and everything, will also become smaller. Step number 5, search references. Again, search for everything, because you know nothing at all, especially messy things. Planes, cars, humans, animals, those are obvious references. You will look those up to see how things go, but you also actually don't know what a forest looks like. You have no idea what trash looks like. This is where true realism is hidden. Trash. Like all kinds of mess. Things that don't matter. Those things human brain doesn't tend to memorize, because we tend to memorize things that are important. Like you'd think you would know what a pile of stones would look like, or a torn cloth, or a mass of bushes. But we don't know anything. If we paint it out of our heads, it's gonna look like a 3-year-old's drawing, comparing to what we could have painted if we used references. So look it up. Look up everything. Absolutely everything. The most boring things where you don't know what to put in there at all. Like this thing next to the road. I don't know. I would probably just fill it up with some boring grass and kind of fade it into this non-grassy area of the surface. But if I search just a little bit, I'll already get some interesting ideas, like, okay, some fallen leaves maybe, that will add cool, interesting, saturated orange spots on the edges of the road, including like little bits of old dead branches falling around, and like all kinds of stuff, how exactly the grass is fighting the road, trying to grow everywhere, and how exactly bushes overlap each other, almost the things that you would think, but how exactly? That's the part. You can't just memorize it. You need to like learn it. After doing it with references always, you kind of will build certain library in your head, but you will always have a reason to look up more and learn more about how reality actually looks. Oh, this is so good. It's just all covered with all kinds of leaves, which totally makes sense. Jungle is so dense, we need much more of all kinds of fallen stuff all over this road. We need to do that. This is a great reference. And that was like my main ugly part in the previous version. First of all, why is it so green? It's weird. And secondly, the road is just so blank. I had no idea what to add there at all. I added a whole bunch of stones on the sides from the road. But why? Jungle has such dense, high-growing foliage that will cover all the stones always. So no point in actual stones. This looks like a small grass in someone's backyard. So yeah, it's really important not to look for like perfect images. You're not gonna be copying the perfect angle or lighting. You will never find a perfect reference like that. You need to search for ideas, like this one. Just the dead leaves and branches falling onto the road. Super important. Then I will also look at exactly the way all the bushes go. Just ideas. I'll implement them very differently into my abstraction. Step number 6. Build everything. The characters, the objects, the environment, but don't draw actual things. Use boxes, cylinders, and spheres, ovals. Draw slowly and carefully, but don't get stuck in the details. We don't need details, we just need the reference for the angle, for the general size and proportions of things. That's it. We don't need to draw specifics. We're going to paint those. This is actually pretty good. I know in the next stage I'm gonna have to like already have an understanding on what things are. So this is a perfect stage to start explaining the abstraction. This is what we're doing. I'm looking at this orange spot and then I'm looking at the reference and I see that in jungle there's actually a lot of really big old trees. So why not make this into a tree trunk? And in here, there will be a cool silhouette, the way it has in here, something like that, and so forth. Like, this frog will be sitting on a big, deep blue kind of a bush / flower, and there will be a whole mass around it, the way we have it, like in here at the bottom, some kind of big leaves, and then it goes lower and lower, and pretty much, a lot of the times, it's just broken bits of trees, sometimes really big ones, like big stems, big tree trunks, that have things growing all over them. So that's a very interesting thing. And yeah, I really like another thing I did. The crucial part is the shape of this road. You can see how there's like a certain indentation going on, like it's uneven, it's going downwards and then going away, and in here it's lower again. And I'm rotating the boxes of each frog to follow that shape. Now it actually feels like they're following an interesting complex shape. This right here is very interesting. It will catch more sunlight in that area, is gonna look awesome. Comparing to the older version where there was nothing like that. It was a smooth, soft road and that's it. I'm gonna make it a lot more eventful. Awesome stuff. So yeah, pretty much I'm done building. Other stuff will come in just an artistic whatever. Of course, you will always be fixing, adding, improving on all the stages. You keep coming up with the idea. Obviously, this is just a general guide. Step number 7, define light. Make your paintbrush a bit smaller. Look at your references. For each element in the abstraction plus your construction sketch, think where the light is coming from. Don't waste your time on details. Without correct lighting, you'll have to repaint them anyway. So in here, you'll find kind of an interesting dilemma. On one hand, we need to define lighting, which means kind of changing colors, but we defined those colors already in the abstraction. So do we change all the abstraction to make things like, if I wanna add the lighting, I would probably like, I don't know, make this part brighter and whatever's facing upwards, it would be darker. No, you don't. Only in smaller details you do, but generally, if this spot is dark, that's because I wanted it to be dark on the level of abstraction. It has a much higher priority than whatever you will define with the lighting. So lighting has to obey the abstraction. If it's dark, then the light is darkened here. Explain why. With the light, with the shadows, and of course with your buildup as well. Like I created a big tree hanging over the whole thing, that means it will cast a big soft shadow on this whole side. So it will be darker because of that. And it will be, as a result, these exact colors. Only on a much smaller scale, I will add like, if this is a layer, I would make it like a bit darker underneath, but to compensate it will be a bit brighter on top. And overall, it's still like the same brightness situation, because we just wanted it to be that way. Jungle generally goes all over the place. Sometimes it's much darker, much brighter, and a lot of leaves and grass are creating really deep shadows. But if this area is bright, that means there will be a lot of overlapping like big leaves that will just catch a lot of light and not show a lot of shadow in this place. But in here, there will be grass that will be much darker and will catch a lot more shadow in between. So this is what you do now. Explain the abstraction that you created with the light, using the help of your build-up sketch. Right now, think on everything as some kind of a vague box as we defined it in the sketch. And just find that light. Explain why these beautiful spots are there. Mind brushwork and slow down. Another thing that's really important, when you're thinking through the lighting and explaining it with like the geometry, you're adding these extra smaller scale elements. Make sure they are also creating the new sub-abstraction. Like it still needs to look like an interesting dance of spots with interesting colors. Like I'm adding this bright side here, but maybe I will add some darker spots elsewhere to jump around and have something interesting to look at. Yeah, adding some shadows in between these frogs, and they will, like in the distance when they blend into one spot, I'm just breaking that spot with some of the shadow. Also keep on thinking with the abstraction factor, as it is in here, like this is just the dance of spots. How exactly those frogs will be there, it's up to me. They don't have to be any specific way. What's important to me is that the spot of shadows would look interesting. And then I'll explain this abstraction later. Really sick. Look at this. Amazing. Such a beautiful picture. So yeah, this is it. We went through all 7 steps. Oh, the picture is not detailed enough. Well then, repeat the last step as many times as you want. Make your brush a bit smaller, look at your references. For every element, think through where the light is coming from. Don't waste your time on details. Find out why these beautiful spots are there. Mind brushwork, slow down. With each repetition of this step, by making the brush smaller and defining more and more detail on the smaller and smaller scale, you will end up having the perfect painting, each part of which will be interesting to look at. It will all have great lighting and everything will be explained and working together really well. At every repetition of the step number 7, you'll be able to just stop working and you'll have a final picture, just on different levels of definition. If you want to know how to create the brush like this, or what kind of software I'm using, check out my previous video. Now I'll go ahead and repeat the step number 7 several times on this page, and listen to some sick tune. See you guys in the next one. Bye! Okay, maybe this picture is too awesome for the rest of the book now. Huh. Should have probably used this method all along.